All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, HSIs, Centering Servingness in Times of COVID-19. This webinar is brought to you by the Alliance of Hispanic Serving Institution Educators, also known as AHSIE. My name is Marla Franco, and I serve as the Assistant Vice Provost for Hispanic Serving Institution Initiatives at the University of Arizona, and I also serve on the AHSIE Council. We are so excited to have you join us today. Last we counted, just over 400 people were registered, so thank you so much for tuning in. It's really exciting. We've definitely had a couple of weeks of planning efforts to get ready for this. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues who also serve on the AHSIE Council and lead efforts at HSIs in various capacities. We will hear from our panelists in a bit throughout the webinar, but let me just briefly introduce them. So today we have Dr. Jeannie Kim, Associate Vice Chancellor for Grants and Economic Development at Riverside Community College District. Dr. Leticia Lopez, Program Manager of HSI Initiatives at San Diego Mesa College. Dr. Paloma Vargas, Assistant Professor of Biology and Director of HSI Initiatives at California Lutheran University. And Dr. Kevin Vichgales, Dean of the College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences at the University of the Incarnate Word. To help guide our time today, let me tell you what we hope to cover and how you can join the conversation. We'll start by laying some foundation. What might be our shared understanding, informed by the literature of what it means to be centered on servingness? Then we'll talk briefly about the critical need and essential nature of remaining centered on servingness during this global health crisis. Then we'll offer 5 servingness spotlights from my colleagues and I, each highlighting both the challenges and opportunities for remaining centered on servingness during these times. And throughout this webinar, we ask that you use the chat feature to share your questions, your thoughts, and your comments with us. We definitely want to hear from you. And we plan some time at the end, just so you know, to respond to what you've shared. So please feel free to do that throughout the presentation. We also encourage you to share your thoughts and strategies for centering servingness in times of COVID-19 on social media. And be sure to tag at AHSIE Educators and consider using the hashtag centered on servingness to join the conversation. Just so you know, today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you in the near future. We'll certainly be reaching out soon to let you know when that's available. So let's talk about servingness. What is it and how have we come to understand it? And more importantly, how are our institutions practicing it, even in times of a pandemic? In Gina Garcia's most recent publication, she defines servingness in a way that goes well beyond the federal requirements to be designated as an HSI. So beyond the metrics of enrolling at least 25% Latinx students and 50% of students from low-income households, what we're really talking about here is the ability to enroll and educate Latinx students through culturally enhancing approaches that center Latinx ways of knowing and being, all with the goal of providing transformative experiences that lead to both positive academic and non-academic outcomes. So why exactly are we talking about the importance of centering servingness in times of COVID-19? Well, first off, HSIs account for less than 20% of colleges and universities across the nation. Yet we enroll nearly 7 out of 10 Latinx students in higher education. On the left side of your screen, you see a map that was recently produced by Excellencia in Education that shows you the concentration of HSIs across the nation. You can see several states such as California, Texas, New York, and Florida that have high concentrations of HSIs. And to the right, you see another map produced by the COVID-19 data repository at Johns Hopkins University. If you were to overlay these maps or simply view them side by side, you would recognize that states with the greatest number of COVID-19 cases are also the same states that have the greatest concentration of HSIs and Latinx population. And you'll likely know all too well that our Latinx students and those from low-income households are disproportionately negatively affected by COVID-19 and its implications. So as we look across our colleges and universities, we have all deployed various strategies to ensure the safety of our campus communities and support continued learning. Some of these strategies are likely more centered on servingness than others. Today, we hope to share with you a few examples of what centering servingness looks like for a few HSIs. In the upcoming days and even weeks, our campuses will all be making important decisions about how to operate next academic year. In fact, many universities have already announced their plans. We find that today's conversation is both timely and pertinent. Pandemic or not, it's always the right time for us to be centered on servingness. So before I turn it over to our panel, I just wanted to quickly share some information about the colleges, universities, and systems that are represented today on the panel. We have 2- and 4-year institutions, including private and public universities, as well as a system-wide community college perspective. Our institutions today are located in California, Texas, and Arizona. And you'll also see enrollment data and the percent of Latinx students enrolled at each of our institutions. Once again, this information will be made available to you after the webinar. So at this point, I'd like to actually turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Jeannie Kim.
Good morning, everybody. If I could get the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk to you about how Riverside Community College District has been actually dealing with the CARES Act and FEMA response and making sure that we're doing principled decision making in order to stay focused on access, equity, and inclusivity, and making also sure that we're doing this in a transparent manner to serve our students and keeping our student needs centered and focused as the main goal of all the actions that we're currently taking. So one of the things that we actually did in order to be able to get the CARES emergency funds out to our students was to establish a system of access. A team got together in order to be able to create a task force across all 3 districts, and we were able to create a comprehensive and cohesive approach to being able to provide the emergency aid funds to our students. We wanted to ensure that all of our students received the information simultaneously and that that access was not inhibited by their lack of technology or access to that technology. And so we made sure that the information was going out through all various channels, including personal touch, as well as the technology components that we actually have listed here. The Rave Alert system, student portal system, and the student resources website were all activated simultaneously, providing students with equal access to that information. We also wanted to focus on the equity component, making sure that our students that the needs that we were trying to serve with the emergency funding that was being actually allocated, that we would actually be able to support the most vulnerable populations. Now, recognizing the Department of Education and how they have been rolling out these funds, we've seen that the undocumented students were not going to be supported with CARES Act monies. So we devised other systems of support, and we have identified other sources of funding and put those pieces together in order for our students to have, again, the supports necessary in order for them to be able to respond to this COVID situation for their education. The inclusivity and data-informed decision-making was really at the heart of everything that we did. We wanted to make sure that we also were transparent and that there was an attitude of neutrality all the way through, meaning we wanted to make sure that students and faculty, staff, administrators, the community at large, were aware of how we were making these decisions. And so there was a board presentation to the Board of Trustees, which is actually located on our website. And at the end of this, there is a link to that website. And we also wanted to make sure that all of this was being broadcast and that it was clear to everybody what the process was. We also didn't want to make this cumbersome for our students. So at every step of the way, we really stayed focused on making sure that it was, again, accessible, that there was an equity base to it, and that we were making inclusive and informed decisions in order to be able to best serve our students. Principled decision-making can be difficult when things are in crisis mode. We often may actually revert back to command and control ways of operating. But we all know that that's not actually the best ways, because we don't always get the best information if we center on just one perspective or one idea. And so in our inclusive decision-making processes, we were sure to include the student leadership and other areas of the business services, et cetera. And as a result, we were able to come up with a system of distribution for these funds in a relatively quick manner, and also maintain the centeredness on students and making sure that our students were being best served with the funding that we had available. So we're actually now developing a phase 2 of the funds that we have remaining in the CARES Act funds, given the different stipulations, and we will be actually highlighting all of those components on our website. So for further information along those lines, please visit us on our website, and that will provide, again, the next steps that we are taking. So now I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Letty Lopez at Mesa Community College.
Hello, I realized I was just speaking to myself. I forgot to unmute. One of the wonderful challenges of Zoom sometimes. Saludos, soy Leticia Lopez. I'm at San Diego Mesa College, program manager of HSI initiatives there. And the perspective I'd like to share with you today is that of how we've come about not just realizing how to distribute funds, but also how to consider what students actually need by first starting with a survey. So shortly after we were all given the order to stay home, our institutional effectiveness office quickly developed a survey to distribute to students to understand what their needs are. And the survey was open for approximately 1 month, from March 25th through April 23rd. In that time, we collected nearly 10,000 responses. Of those 10,000 responses, let's keep in mind 40% of our student population is Latinx. And the genesis of the idea behind the survey is that these reports were generated with the idea that it's reflective of really the spirit of our college, and that we value, support, collaboration. We care about the student experience. We're mindful about what we communicate to them and how they communicate to us. So in that vein, we created the survey with questions about what challenges they're facing, how the college can help, and what additional resources they would like access to. And I'd like to just focus my time on 2 of those topics, the challenges faced and those 6 themes. Among the top challenges faced by students, students reported that an income loss and an inability to pay their bills ranked at 58%, about 25%. And to respond to that, our Vice President of Student Services this morning sent out a message to all students saying, indicating that thanks to CARES Act grant funding, Eligible students are now welcome to apply for up to $500 worth of aid. And in addition to that, they also qualify for COVID-19 emergency funding. And that's a separate application they would need to fill out. More challenges faced include working remotely and food insecurity. About 16% of student respondents indicated that food insecurity is constantly on their mind. And to that effect, we have stepped up our availability of food. We have a resource called The Stand, where we partner with the San Diego Food Bank, where students are able to come by, drive by, and our staff and faculty are in their PPE, and they're out there distributing food to students. In addition, children homeschooling and unstable home living situations ranked about 13 and 10% on that survey. Now, how can the college help? Some 6 themes that came up are, financial relief and flexibility in grading, dropping, pass, no pass, waiving, offering partial or full tuition waivers. And communication. Students really stress the importance of strong, just persistent communication via either the president's weekly forums that she delivers, and you can see that when you visit our college website at sdmesa.edu. At the forefront, there's a tab on COVID-19 updates, as well as student support services. And also a tab to the weekly YouTube presentations that the president posts and uploads there. Mental health services also rank pretty high on ways that students identify that the college can help. And very importantly, and something brought up by Dr. Kim, is how our undocumented students can tap into some of these resources. We do have a Borderless Scholars Program at our district. At Mesa College, City College, Miramar College, and Continuing Education have all our Borderless Scholars Program have joined forces, and they host virtual conferences on how these students can access support. We also have DACA students so they're not eligible for CARES Act funding, but we have partnered, Mesa College has partnered with Jewish Family Services to provide immigration and legal services for them. In addition, we offer a parking lot, Wi-Fi access from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Fridays, so that students can come to campus. They stay in their cars, they can still at least access the internet that way from one dedicated parking lot. We also have laptops available for students to check out. And there's a very simple checkout system available under student resources online. And students fill out a basic 2-3 question questionnaire. We set up a time for them to come by and pick up those laptops, webcams, and document cameras as well. So those are some of the resources that we offer at our community college. And I'm happy to take questions at the end of the session. But without further ado, I would like to pass over the mic to my colleague at Cal Lutheran University, and Dr. Paloma Vargas.
Thank you, Leti, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all staying well and safe during this time of COVID. As Leti mentioned and Marla mentioned earlier, I'm an assistant professor of biology, and I'm also the director of our Hispanic Serving Institute initiatives and co-director of one of our Title III grants. I'm going to give you a little bit of perspective kind of from the ground on the teaching side of things, and a little bit on the student services side of things. So one of the areas that we focused on as a university was bridging the digital divide beyond that technology piece. And my colleagues have touched upon this a little bit already, ensuring that students are food secure, that they're housing secure. And we've done taken very similar steps to what they've taken as well. So we do have a Wi-Fi or hotspot parking lot behind one of our buildings. We're a very small institution, so we're able to provide that one-on-one contact still to students, and that's something that we pride ourselves in. So we wanted to continue to do that. Now, how do you actually do that through a technology-based or virtually based environment? So one of the things that became very clear to us and very important in our work is that we had to be equity-minded in our teaching, and that meant that we had to look at a variety of different things. So including cultural competency practices online, and using a variety of different webinars, we've been able to engage faculty that specifically are part of the STEM fields. Those of us that teach in the STEM fields, I'll use myself as an example. I teach a biology course, an intro biology course that is laboratory based. It's 100% laboratory based, in fact. And so switching over to a virtual environment became very tricky, and we had to really make sure that students were able to engage in a laboratory setting in a culturally competent way. And one of the things that we actually ended up doing was reaching out not only to those faculty members that were teaching, can we go one slide back? Thank you. Not only to the faculty members that were teaching lab courses, but also to all of the faculty members that were engaging students in summer research or faculty mentored research, and asked that they turn their projects into projects that could be easily accessed by students through a virtual environment. Just to give you an example, my science work, aside from equity and inclusion, is based on an infectious disease called Legionella pneumophila. I study infectious diseases, which brings me into this time of COVID as it's a very special time for me. Specifically, I work on diseases that are spread from human to human. So this is a time where I could shift away from the research that I normally do, but move to a research-based environment that is 100% online. So our students have now, all of our summer research students have been transitioned to online virtual research projects for the summer. All of our labs were converted, and in that conversion, we were able to do things like add project management apps to our learning abilities to enhance that high touch with students. So I know colleagues and myself who are now using platforms like Slack. They're not paying me, I wish they were, or Microsoft Teams or Google Classroom to have a higher impact and a higher level of interaction with students as they go through with their research projects, whether it's a research project in the teaching laboratory or in the research laboratory. Now, that's one side of things. The other side of things where we work together is re-envisioning that servingness for students that are part of our Title III programming and part of our Title V programming. So both our Title V programs and our Title III programs, along with all of our student services at the university level, student life, residence life, counseling and psychological services, we've all implemented virtual office hours. I was going to say happy hours, but that's not the same thing. Virtual office hours and virtual formats to engage students further. We've also looked into creating additional courses or additional free environments where people can learn about pandemics and people can learn about why it's important to continue to socially distance. On our admissions side of things, we've done equity and inclusion webinars through our HSI efforts, where we invited students, again, that part of the student engagement, invited our student club leaders to host their own webinars to tell incoming students or admitted students what our university was about and how they could become engaged. Now, one of the things that I get a lot of questions about is the biology of returning. The biology of returning is very, very interesting. We do have to continue to socially distance. The epidemiology charts that we see the virology and the basic biology of this virus really should be telling us in a variety of different ways that coming back into a quote unquote normal or traditional environment in the fall would be a big mistake. And so I'm just going to say that out there. I know that there are people that are going to disagree, but that's something for you to consider as you move forward, how you're going to deliver instruction for your university, for your institution as you move on. Definitely happy to take questions as we move forward, but I want to first introduce Dr. Kevin Vichkalis from the University of the Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Texas, and he's going to tell you what his campus has been doing.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be able to be with you today and to share a little bit about the type of activities the University of the Incarnate Word has been engaged with. Servingness for us is embedded within the mission tenets of our Catholic mission. And so the idea of working together in harmony and in community is at the center point of our work. All of the comments I will have today really relate to both faculty and student perspectives and the types of activities that we've had to engage in. Many of these are will be familiar with all of you, with the similar types of activities that have gone on your campuses as well. But I believe that the focus has been just a little bit different in terms of the types of activities that we've gone on. So we've heard our colleagues speak to the digital divide. And of course, while all of our students report their ability to connect and have devices, the reality of that is far different, especially in those students and faculty who are located in rural locations. One would assume that everyone has everything that is needed, but we know different. So part of our response to that was to work with, to develop partnerships with private providers and to help to extend both devices and connectivity to our students and to faculty who needed them so that instruction could go forward. One of the elements that we had with that was related to equipment, checking out equipment from campus. Typically, this is something that we don't do. Of course, we provide a lot of labs, a lot of activities, a lot of technology for our students to utilize while they're on campus. But when we go off campus, then that becomes a difficult situation. So if you think about programs like 3D animation, programs like computer science, the type of machines that they work on to do their work are not something that students typically have in their possession. So what we designed was a process by which we could check out equipment and allow the students to take that home. And just give you one partnership that we developed in my area specifically for my music students. Not all students had keyboards for their keyboarding classes. We're music majors, and therefore we worked with a private partnership with Alamo Music to be able to rent those keyboards and send them to their students at their home locations and then return them, just as one example to allow instruction to continue. When we look at instruction, of course, we all went through the extended spring break or week to get ourselves prepared for remote instruction. And of course, that started with training with our Center for Teaching and Learning, partnering with our Division of Information Technology and our instructional designers, all to focus on how we would transition to remote instruction, but stay focused on connecting to our students and replicating the quote high touch context that education takes place in here at the university. For many of our courses, especially our studios and labs, that meant salvaging our student learning outcomes and redesigning our courses for that second half of the term. And that work is, of course, continued on for what is now the summer terms, which have started for us, and as we're looking towards fall. Like other campuses, we also have done faculty and student surveys to assess the transition to remote instruction. That was designed both as a check-in for faculty first, just for them to provide us feedback about how it's going for them, what are they finding as the wins and the losses in this regard, and to identify problem areas that we could further work on. Student surveys were again taking the perspective from the student perspective of how was remote instruction going and how were they looking and how were they working with that. All of our results were relatively positive in terms of what was returned to us and what we were able to glean from that and be able to put in practical solutions to fill certain gaps. Overall, as we look at this, most of our faculty had a choice in terms of the transition of whether they would do synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, or blended. My traditional faculty in the humanities automatically knee-jerk defaulted to, we'll go with synchronous instruction. But of course, as they quickly found out, that did not necessarily correspond to the lives of their students who had to now move home and go back to situations where they were sharing technology, they were sharing that both with their brothers and sisters, siblings who were going to school, either K through 12 or university, and their parents who were remote working from home as well. So all of that became an interesting quandary for faculty, but of course it was the focus on flexibility in meeting student needs that helped overcome those obstacles. As my previous colleagues have spoken to, a number of student needs were identified. Some of our students are housed on campus, and of course this is their primary location, the permanent housing location. So clearing the campus as we did meant finding new locations for those students to live. And we did that with housing students through partnerships we had or with other community members who were willing to take students into their homes. Food insecurity, of course, is a longstanding issue on our campus, but only exacerbated by the COVID-19 situation as student employment and student off-campus work was impacted. So we've had higher demand and needs that have come to us, but of course the Cardinal Cupboard, which is designed just for this purpose, has remained stocked by the community at large, by the faculty community here and the staff community, and all those needs are being met. As many institutions have done, we've set up emergency funding to address some of the financial insecurity of students to help them get over the difficulties of the immediate crisis. Academic and student support services transitioned online. Most of these are traditionally delivered in a face-to-face format. We do have online options, but we had to reverse that in this current crisis. And of course, our career services offices working with students on employment issues was a large need. Turning to academic policies, many of us have gone to pass-fail policies for the spring 2020 term. For ourselves, we designed a satisfactory, unsatisfactory policy, which mimics essentially that pass-fail in other contexts, as well as extending the withdrawal period for students past the submission of final grades for the term. This was designed to keep students focused on doing the best they could given the circumstances that they were working in, being able to see the grade that they received from the class, and then if something that they chose not to accept, they would be provided an option to withdraw. We thought that gives great flexibility to our students in terms of keeping a class or managing their academic progress and transitions in the university. Similar to that, we had to think about impacts on research activity, especially how that impacts our faculty. Not only do our students get great benefit from working with our faculty in a variety of settings, conducting creative activities and original research, but the impact of closing down campus and shifting to remote work, especially in the sciences, was difficult in terms of the type of impact that has on faculty research activity. So one of our responses to that, and this is working with our faculty, is to design rank and tenure clock extensions, as well as directing how we would handle student evaluations for spring 2020 as related to the annual review process, which is done each year. All of these academic policies were designed to be flexible and to afford both faculty and students the opportunity to make the best of the current situation and to recognize the realities of what we're dealing with. In terms of contingency planning, our Office of the Provost, working with all of the academic deans on campus, have gone through multiple contingency planning scenarios, taking a holistic approach to all campus academic and student service activities. And we've been working on multiple plans. I'm sure many of you have been engaged in certain activities that are similar to this as related to your own activities. But just to give you a sense of the type of scenarios we've had to run for fall, we're running scenarios for full return, option A, or full online, option B, or small group, less than 10 coming together. So we'll stay mostly online, but allow some to come back for studio and lab courses specifically. Or then a fourth option, although I feel unlikely, is with groups of less than 50. Big impact on all of us is just the fluidity of the current situation and not knowing exactly how this is going to roll out. Most of us want to get back to what we call normal, but I don't think there is a new normal. I describe it as a new reality. The new reality in higher education is that most of our students are going to be significantly impacted by the current crisis. We as institutions have an obligation to respond to them the best we can. We are all being impacted by realized revenue losses for the spring semester, as well as potential revenue losses going forward. And we're all trying to plan for that. We're all hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. My campus has chosen to keep all employees employed at this point. We have not gone through any cost-cutting measures in the sense of personnel, although I know that that is being and will be something that will be looked at going forward if necessary. But our commitment was to keep our personnel intact as best we can, and then make up deficits in other areas of university operations. So with that, I think my time is up, and I'd like to send it over to Marla. And Marla, please take it away. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It is really great to hear and see from you all today. Certainly, so my name again is Marla Franco, and I serve as the Assistant Vice Provost at the University of Arizona for Hispanic Serving Institution Initiatives. So certainly my colleagues, covered a number of strategies, many of which we have deployed here at the University of Arizona. But I just wanted to highlight a few other examples of ways that we really attempted to center servingness through our efforts as an HSI. We're located in Tucson, Arizona. We are certainly a large Research One land-grant university, one that resides on the original homelands of the Thahnawtham Nation, and within a state that has 22 federally recognized tribes. So being centered on servingness, in my opinion, can really help cultivate solidarity, especially during times of uncertainty as we find ourselves in today. The University of Arizona has a sizable graduate and professional student population and ranks quite high in conferring PhDs to both Native American and Hispanic graduate students. Unfortunately, admitted graduate students who had not yet committed last month had their funding packages withdrawn, although not their admissions. And so this certainly was a tough financial decision for the university, and certainly a tough one for admitted graduate students. Although I didn't have all the answers nor funding to offer, I felt compelled to reach out to applicants, particularly those from diverse backgrounds. And so I was able to partner with our graduate college's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and I decided to write a letter that they helped me distribute to students, admitted students. And so in this letter, I thought it was important to not make any promises that I couldn't keep. And I didn't paint an unrealistic picture of what the University of Arizona would be like, especially in the upcoming year. But instead, I spoke from the heart and I expressed compassion. And I was vulnerable in sharing aspects of my own identity as a first-generation Latino who earned a PhD. That letter went out last week. And I've received several emails, text messages, and Facebook messages from applicants who felt seen and heard by this letter. The University of Arizona is also a neighbor to several high Hispanic enrolling school districts. So our partners in K through 12. As the implications of COVID-19 evolved, our local school districts worked tirelessly to meet not just the educational needs of its students, but also the basic needs and the mental health needs of both students and their families. So as HSIs, we asked ourselves, how could we possibly help? And instead of assuming what we thought they needed, we asked them what they needed. We listened, and then we mobilized. Efforts resulted in a thoughtful and caring video message directed at graduating seniors that was created by some of our faculty in the College of Education, as well as a calling campaign to admitted students of color, those from low-income households, those who were residents of Arizona, and especially those from our rural communities. So over the past few weeks, 65 employees across the university volunteered their time and made phone calls to approximately 5,500 admitted students, many of whom attend schools in high Hispanic enrolling high schools. Also, although several collaborations exist between HSI initiatives and Native American initiatives at the University of Arizona, this really was the time for these two areas to come together. For example, we have shared amongst one another grant development resources and student data to help meet some of those quick turnaround grant deadlines that aim to provide financial resources and support, particularly to our Native students and those from rural communities. I think really both areas realize that centered on Servingness together is essential for providing support to our community here at the University of Arizona. So those are just a few examples and illustrations in addition to those mentioned by my colleagues as panelists. And we are just really excited to share some of these examples and illustrations with you today. We really wanted to make sure that we were having discussions as an HSI community across the nation to really, hold our feet to the fire in ways in which we were centering Servingness through such difficult times. So now I'm actually going to turn this back over to Jeannie, who will help us engage some of the questions and the comments that you all have gratefully been contributing to today's webinar conversation. So I will do that right now.
So good morning again, or good afternoon. We've got quite a lot of questions that require a lot more in-depth answers, but we will try our best to answer these questions. So to the panelists, there was a question specifically around, given the current circumstances, what can you suggest to help promote, maintain Latinx student enrollment, new and continuing, for retention for fall 2020? I think some of those examples were already given, but if some of the other panelists could also chime in on that particular question. Letty? All of you have to unmute.
Wonderful. Okay. I'm just getting that. I was just finishing answering some questions because we had a chat room and a Q&A room both open, and I'm typing away, and so I'm multitasking. I just answered Angel's question about Latinidad, queerness, LGBTQ assistance there is for students on our campus. But going back to the question that you asked, I think it was...
Given the current circumstances, what can you suggest to help promote, maintain Latinx student enrollment, new and continuing, and retention for fall 2020?
Great. Well, I'm not sure if we have anybody from our campus listening here from outreach, but we have a very strong outreach office that is actually currently doing a lot of outreach, virtual outreach to our feeder high schools. We also send a team out to the continuing education centers, also to groups that like ESL groups that whose parents join in the evenings and come together. I think they're still doing it virtually, and who also learn about services available to them should they decide to transfer or go on to the for-credit side of to continue their education, or also to inform their children to go on to college. So myself, a financial aid director, and 2 more professors go and do outreach at these centers. And we speak to the parents in Spanish, and we let them know what kinds of services they have available to themselves and their students have when they come to Mesa. Now, specifically speaking, with reference to what will happen this fall, since we have as a campus decided to deliver instruction online and lab classes face-to-face, that transition point, that is going to be something that we all will have to discuss, because there is that reticence on part of parents who ask, well, what's in there for our kids? When we send them to college, we want them to have the face-to-face contact, to make those connections with faculty, to have that college experience that they won't be able to get when they're sitting at home and getting that. So that's another conversation to be had. But for the time being, this is our past practice, and we're going to use part of the summer to start thinking about how we're going to convey that message to continue to advocate to families that their kids should continue in college, even though we'll be delivering the platform online.
So, Paloma?
Yeah, thanks, Jeannie. So great question. One of the things that we've been doing as a campus, now that we've always done a lot of outreach. We do things like what we call College Includes You, with the CLU capitalized to brand a little bit, where we go and do in-person outreach in English and in Spanish to our local high school communities. And that is a project that is HSI and admissions working together. More specifically, during these times where we're virtual, our admissions team, in collaboration with a variety of different offices on campus, have created a series of webinars that can be accessed on our website at callutheran.edu/admissions to engage incoming students and also students that may be on the fence about coming back. One of the things that makes Cal Lutheran really special is our low faculty to student ratio, that high contact between faculty and students. And so faculty have been, including myself in my role as biology faculty and as HSI director, often in different webinars, having outreach to students and to families, speaking in a variety of different languages, including Spanish. I actually have a HSI admissions webinar after this one, where I'll be speaking in Spanish to potential family members of the Cal Lutheran community and discussing what fall might look like. We haven't yet made a decision to go online. I don't know that we will. Our focus is on bringing students back safely to campus, and we're looking at a variety of different ways to do so.
Terrific. Thanks so much. One of the questions here is from Patricia, asking, our current situation has challenged us all in multiple ways. Many faculty were challenged in moving their classes to an online platform and work hard to keep students engaged. Knowing our communities of color are some of the most impacted by COVID-19, how are your institutions working to engage faculty, both full-time and part-time, in training that addresses strategies that are equity-minded and help engage and retain students of color in their classes? I will jump in on this one. At RCCD, we've been very focused on a number of different components. One is in terms of the equity piece of it, as I mentioned in my presentation. And we are constantly pushing out information about how to create a much more equity balanced and inclusive curriculum development, et cetera. Now, we recognize that the faculty are overwhelmed with just the fact of taking classes online. and that is something that we are supporting. It is a no choice situation as far as to the online medium is concerned, but where OER and so online educational, open educational resources, which decrease the cost of education for our students, as well as making sure that they are utilizing inclusive curriculum to keep students engaged. Those are the indicators for quality. And so while we are very focused on just the basics of getting things online, we are equally focused on increasing quality. So one of the things that our chancellor has stated again and again is that even in this time of crisis, it's even more important in this time of crisis that we actually are effective, efficient, and that we are increasing quality and not using this as an excuse to let things slide. And again, that's the reason why we're focused on the access, equity, and the inclusivity in relation to all aspects, but particularly in relation to teaching. In California, there are a number of different seminars that are being put together. They are open. It is a webinar that's actually being offered right now from the California State Community College Chancellor's Office, in partnership with USC's CUE, the Center for Urban Education. Many of you know Estela Ben-Simon's work, and that partnership is definitely taking a very keen eye towards the faculty involvement, engaged learning, inclusivity, etc. So that webinar is available and open, I believe, to the public, so you can check that out on the California Chancellor's, Community College Chancellor's website. Are there other panelists that would like to address that particular question? Marlon?
Yes, Jeannie. I just wanted to share one more contribution. And I think in terms of equity, I think it's also important for our institutional leaders to really be engaging shared governance. And so particularly as we plan for next academic year, I mean, obviously, you know, we were all caught off guard in the midst of spring. But when you have various perspectives, you know, at the table, you know, we really are more likely well poised than to develop a plan that is thoughtful from various perspectives. And so even your approach towards some of the institutional decision making that's happening can also and should also be characterized as equity minded. So for those of you who have shared governance entities that perhaps are able to engage and incorporate the perspectives of faculty, of staff, and of students, I definitely would highly encourage you to engage shared governance on your campus to think about your planning efforts.
Yeah, and RCCD, I put that answer in the questions answered section, so that can also be referenced in relation to what RCCD is doing. There's a question here in relation to how are we supporting scholars' parents who are managing parenting duties and academics simultaneously at home? Would any of the panelists like to offer a suggestion or answer to that question of what your campuses are doing in relation to supporting our students that are also managing parental duties?
Yes.
All right, Dr. Vitalis, I take it away.
One of the realities of our student population is that about 15% are parents. And so if they've had to take on homeschooling as well as their own parenting duties, as well as taking care of friends and neighbors, as well as following their studies, the key word to success has been flexibility. So while faculty may have started with a synchronous plan for learning for given parents, that might have switched to blended or asynchronous for that student. So it's been a matter of faculty understanding who their students are, what their particular challenges are, and working with them to overcome those obstacles. Because a parent's life every day is a challenge and has new activities that need to be addressed, new challenges that need to be addressed. So having a faculty understanding of the lived experiences of our students has been key to that response.
Thank you so much. Next question was, has anyone's campus provided specifics as to the extent of which student services will be open in the summer and/or fall, including first-year experience, tutoring, supplemental instruction, etc.? Letty has actually answered part of this question from the San Diego Mesa side. For our CCD, we've actually been continuing with all of our tutoring and supplemental instruction in the online platforms. And so all of the online supports that are made available, we're very fortunate in California for the community colleges. The Chancellor's Office, the State Chancellor's Office has made all of the online tools available for the integration of software that allows for the tutoring, supplemental instruction, and also the accessibility pieces for our differently abled students to be readily identified within our courses, the online courses. And the faculty are receiving training and support in how to be able to refer students to all of those resources, and also making the changes necessary in their online content to meet the accessibility ally scores in relation to the way that we are delivering the content for our students. And the accessibility issues can go from just not being able to read the actual content of the course materials because it's uploaded incorrectly, or the size or font, etc. So it does affect all of our students, and not just those that have disabilities or issues in relation to being differently abled. Other panelists would like to chime in on that particular question about the kinds of student services and supports that are being provided at this time? All right, hearing none, I'm going to continue to move on. I think we have time to answer potentially one more question. Let's see. How the one piece is, are HSIs engaging with non-traditional, non-educational systems and agencies to support the Latinx students and fellow community? If so, could you share the engagement process and examples of such partnerships? Do any of the panelists have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do, Jeannie.
Okay.
This is Kevin Vishkalis. The types of things that we are doing at this current moment is really an extension of the type of activities that are embedded in our academic programs. So recognizing the challenges that the current crisis affords everyone has brought all the partners to the table and asked, what can we do? What more can we do in the current situation? So we worked with them to extend those conversations and try to provide greater opportunities for our students. In terms of, these are not educational, these are mostly businesses and non-educational organizations that we are working with. But again, their basis is in the extension of connectivity of academic programs to real world situations. And we have just extended those activities in the current crisis.
Terrific. For Riverside, I'm responsible for economic development as a part of my district level responsibilities. And so we're in constant communication with our 2 county offices of economic development and trying to identify WIOA fundings to be able to help support new job skills that people might want to pivot into, working directly with the businesses to help them sort of establish processes to be able to hire new individuals as well, as the businesses themselves actually pivot. So we are trying to work along those lines as well, and having a variety of different conversations across the 2 counties that we're actually responsible for. And making sure that our CTE programs in particular are connected to those conversations as we consider ways forward out of and in recovery post-COVID. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Marla to finish us out.
Yeah, thank you, Jeannie. Before we wrap up here, I just have one more contribution to that. Actually, tomorrow I have a webinar where I'll serve as a panelist, and part of the group of panelists and part of the audience that we'll be talking to are utility providers. So when you think about access to Wi-Fi, some of the conversations that higher education institutions might need to be having a discussion with is utility companies that provide service and support throughout your state and your regions, and ways in which you can collaborate to ensure connectivity, particularly in communities that tend to be underserved in those areas. So just wanted to put that in. But we certainly want to thank you again for joining us. We wanted to let you know very quickly that AHSIE is a membership organization, a national professional organization. And we certainly are launching this webinar series with today's effort. And we wanted to make sure that today's webinar, as well as our subsequent webinars, are completely open access. But we would encourage you to take a look at our AHSIE website. There's certainly a number of features that come along with membership that you likely could start taking advantage of quite immediately. So we definitely encourage you to take a look at that. And we'd like to thank our sponsors for 2020, who have really provided a great amount of support in various ways to enabling AHSIE efforts to exist. So thank you for your continued support. This is our contact information for each of the panelists. And likely the best way to reach us these days. Once again, we will be providing this webinar to our registered participants, as well as making it accessible more widely. So this information will most certainly be available to you within a short period of time after today's webinar. Once again, we thank you so much for joining us. It was really important for us to have this conversation stewarded by us for us. So thank you, and I encourage you to find your own ways to remain centered on servingness. Thank you. Goodbye.